In the remote mountains of Montana, Wade Thorne lived a quiet life on his farm, until the day a ruthless Mexican cartel decided to take his land by force. They thought they were dealing with just another aging rancher. They couldn't have been more wrong. For 30 years, Wade was the deadliest Delta Force commander in history. When the cartel's intimidation turns violent, they learn too late they've awakened a legend. With his elite team reassembled, Wade is about to show the cartel why he earned his reputation. His team dismantled the largest criminal organization in 5 days, using nothing but a remote farm and the tactical genius that made him a ghost on the battlefield. Before we jump back into the video, let us know where you're watching from, and if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe because I have something really special for you tomorrow. And now back to the video. The morning frost crunched under Wade Thorne's boots as he walked his property line. Dawn was breaking over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. His German shepherd Atlas trotted beside him, alert and watchful, as always. At 65, Wade still moved with the fluid grace of a much younger man, his eyes constantly scanning his surroundings, old habits that had kept him alive through 3 decades of combat. Something wasn't right. Wade knelt to examine fresh tire tracks in the mud. Atlas growled softly in agreement. The tracks were deep, made by heavy vehicles, and they weren't from any local trucks he recognized. Sarah Bennett, his closest neighbor, pulled up in her weathered pickup. "Wade, thank God you're out here. Did you hear about the Hendersons?" Wade straightened, brushing dirt from his jeans. "What about them?" "They're gone. Just packed up and left last night, no warning. But this morning I saw men at their place. Big black SUVs, guys who don't look like they're from around here. Cartel." Wade's voice was calm, but his mind was already racing through scenarios, analyzing threats, forming plans. Sarah nodded, her hands gripping her steering wheel tightly. "That's what they're saying in town. They've been moving up from the south, buying up properties. Those who don't sell, well, they find other ways to persuade them." "Have they approached you yet?" "No, but Miller's place went last week. Same thing. Mysterious buyers. Too much money to refuse. Those who stick around say they're using the farms for distribution routes." "Makes sense," Wade said, his tactical mind already mapping it out. Isolated properties, legitimate cover for vehicle traffic, storage facilities already in place. Sarah leaned out her window, lowering her voice. "Wade, these aren't ordinary criminals. They're organized, well-funded. The sheriff's out of his depth, and nobody else will stand up to them." Wade patted the side of her truck. "Don't worry about me, Sarah. I've dealt with worse." After she drove away, Wade whistled for Atlas and headed toward his barn. Inside, beneath the ordinary tools and farm equipment, lay a hidden cellar he'd installed when he first bought the property. "Old paranoia," his friends had called it. Wade called it preparation. He lifted the false floorboard, revealing a cache of equipment he'd hoped never to use again. Military-grade communications gear, weapons, tactical gear, everything he'd need if things went south. He'd spent his entire career planning for worst-case scenarios. This wouldn't be any different. His phone buzzed, a text from an old contact in law enforcement. "Cartel's moving hard and fast. 7 properties taken in the last month. Watch your back." Wade pocketed the phone and moved to his office, pulling out detailed maps of the valley. His property sat at a crucial junction, controlling the main road and overlooking 3 different approach routes. No wonder they wanted it. The sound of vehicles on the main road caught his attention. Through his window, he watched 3 black SUVs roll past his gate, moving slowly, too slowly. Reconnaissance, marking the next target. "Atlas," Wade said, scratching his dog's ears. "They don't know who they're dealing with." Looking at his land. Wade felt a familiar tension building, the calm before combat that he'd known so many times before. The cartel thought they were targeting an old man's farm. Instead, they were walking into a kill zone designed by one of the most experienced special operations commanders in history, and he wouldn't be fighting alone. Wade reached for his secure phone, dialing a number he hadn't used in years. Knox. It's Phantom. Remember that favor you owe me? Time to pay up. The cartel made their first move at noon. 5 black SUVs rolled up Wade's driveway, kicking up dust as they approached his farmhouse. Through his kitchen window, Wade counted 12 men, all carrying themselves with military precision. Not typical cartel thugs. Professional operators, he muttered to Atlas, who lay quietly at his feet. Ex-military, maybe contractors. The German shepherd's ears twitched in acknowledgement, trained to recognize tension in his master's voice. Their leader stepped out first, tall, well-dressed, moving with the careful grace of a trained killer. 2 men flanked him, hands carefully positioned near concealed weapons. The others spread out in a practiced formation, covering all angles of approach. Mr. Thorne? The leader's accent was slight, cultured. I'm Miguel Reyes. I represent some investors interested in your property. Wade opened his door, projecting the image of a simple farmer, but his positioning was precise. Clear fields of fire, multiple escape routes, Atlas perfectly placed for attack or defense. Not selling, Wade said simply. Land's been in my family too long. Reyes smiled, but his eyes remained cold. We're prepared to be very generous. 3 million cash. More than fair for a ranch this size. Money's not everything. No, Reyes agreed, his tone hardening. Sometimes other factors come into play. Accidents happen on farms. Equipment malfunctions. Fires start. It would be tragic if anything happened to your property. Or you. Wade allowed just a hint of steel to enter his voice. That sounded like a threat, Mr. Reyes. Simply stating facts. This valley is changing. Progress cannot be stopped. You can either profit from it or... He left the sentence hanging. 2 men were circling toward Wade's barn, trying to be subtle about their reconnaissance. Their movement patterns confirmed his suspicions. These were trained operators, probably ex-special forces. 24 hours, Reyes announced. Think about our offer. After that, it becomes significantly less generous. As they turned to leave, one of the men made the mistake of moving too close to Atlas. The dog's growl was barely audible, but the man's reaction told Wade everything. His hand immediately went to his concealed weapon, his stance shifting to combat ready. Careful with that dog, Reyes warned. Would be a shame if something happened to him. Wade's response was quiet, but carried the weight of decades of combat experience. That would be your second mistake. Don't make a first one. Something in his tone made Reyes pause. For just a moment, the facade cracked, and Wade saw uncertainty flicker across the cartel commander's face. After they left, Wade moved quickly. He activated his hidden security system, then reached for his secure phone. How long? He asked when Knox answered. 2 hours out. Teams assembled and ready, just like old times? Better hurry, Wade replied, watching the SUVs disappear down his driveway. They'll be back before their deadline. Men like that can't handle being challenged. He glanced at the surveillance feeds showing the cartel vehicles meeting with more teams on the valley roads. They were preparing for a show of force, planning to make an example of the stubborn old farmer who dared to refuse them. Wade smiled, grimly. Let them come. They'd learn what others had discovered too late. Sometimes the deadliest predators are the ones that don't look threatening at all. The old team, Wade's old team, arrived as the sun was setting, their vehicles carefully spaced to avoid attention. Knox came first in a weathered pickup, followed by Cyrus in a mud-splattered Jeep. Ghost and Doc brought up the rear, in vehicles that looked like local contractors' trucks. They gathered in Wade's barn, where he'd already set up a tactical operations center beneath the innocent-looking farm equipment. 20 years melted away as the team fell into familiar patterns, checking weapons and equipment with practiced efficiency. Quite a setup you got here, Knox commented, noting the surveillance feeds covering every approach to the farm. Been planning for this? Since the day I bought the place, Wade confirmed. Old habits. Ghost, their communications expert, was already tapping into local frequencies. Cartel's got 3 bases set up in the valley, using foreclosed farms as staging areas. Professional operation. They've got ex-military operators, Wade explained. Saw their movement patterns during their friendly visit, explains the chatter. I'm picking up, Ghost added. They're using encrypted comms, military protocols. These aren't typical cartel thugs. Doc finished setting up his medical station while studying satellite imagery of the valley. Good terrain for defense, multiple fallback positions, clear fields of fire. You picked this place carefully. That's why they want it, Wade replied. Controls the whole Northern Valley approach, perfect for their distribution network. Knox, who'd been checking sight lines through his sniper scope, turned to Wade. They'll come in force. Make an example of the old man who defied them. Counting on it. Wade spread out a topographical map. They'll try to overwhelm us with numbers, shock, and awe. But they're used to intimidating civilians. They've forgotten what it's like to face real operators. Cyrus grinned while unpacking his demolition gear. Going to remind them? Going to teach them a lesson they won't forget. Wade activated a hidden panel, revealing more tactical equipment. I've got everything we need to turn this farm into their worst nightmare. As night fell, the team moved with practiced efficiency, setting up defensive positions and booby traps that would appear innocent to casual observation. Years of combat experience flowed into every preparation. Through their surveillance, they watched cartel vehicles moving through the valley, gathering for what they thought would be an overwhelming show of force. They're bringing in their heavy hitters, Ghost reported, intercepting communications. At least 30 operators, military-grade weapons, planning a midnight raid. Perfect timing, Wade replied. Darkness was always our best ally. His team shared knowing looks. They hadn't survived countless Black Ops missions by fighting fair. The cartel was about to learn why Wade's call sign had been Phantom, and why some legends of Delta Force never really retire. Remember Kandahar? Knox asked as they finished their preparations. When those Taliban fighters thought they had us surrounded? Until they realized we'd let them surround us, Cyrus finished with a grim smile. Same play here? Wade nodded, checking the elaborate trap network they'd established. Let them think they have the advantage. Let them commit fully to the attack. Then show them what happens when you corner a ghost, Doc added, understanding the strategy. As midnight approached, Wade gathered his team for final instructions. These men had fought beside him in the world's deadliest places, survived missions that would never see declassification. Now they would defend his home against an enemy that had made the fatal mistake of underestimating them. They think they're hunting an old farmer, he told his team. Let's show them what it feels like to be the prey. Through the darkness, they could hear vehicles approaching. The cartel was coming in force, ready to teach a lesson about defying their power. They had no idea they were walking into a trap set by some of the deadliest operators in military history. And by the time they figured it out, it would be far too late. Midnight brought the sound of engines, multiple vehicles approaching from different directions. Wade watched through his thermal optics as the cartel forces spread out around his property, their movements betraying professional training. They're using standard military infiltration patterns, Knox reported from his sniper position. 3-man teams, maintaining overlapping fields of fire. These boys know what they're doing. Good, Wade replied softly. Means they'll follow predictable protocols. Ghost status, intercepting their communications. They're using encrypted channels, but Ghost smiled as his equipment cracked their codes. Not encrypted enough. The cartel commander's voice filled their earpieces. All teams in position. Remember, we want to make an example. No survivors. Wade allowed himself a grim smile. Let them get closer. Wait for my signal. Through their night vision, they watched 30 heavily armed men advance on the farmhouse. Their equipment was top tier, military grade, their movements showing years of combat training. They thought they were executing a perfect midnight raid. Instead, they were walking into a kill zone. Now, Wade commanded softly. The night erupted in calculated chaos. Cyrus's carefully placed charges detonated, not to kill, but to disorient and divide. The cartel's neat formation shattered as the ground seemed to explode around them. "Contact front," someone shouted in Spanish. "We're taking fire from..." Knox's rifle cracked once, twice, 3 times. Each shot found its mark with surgical precision, disabling weapons rather than killing. The cartel operators discovered their expensive rifles suddenly unusable. "They're everywhere," another voice shouted. "Multiple defenders, all directions." But there weren't multiple defenders. There was just Wade's team, using decades of combat experience to seem like a much larger force. They moved like ghosts through the darkness, striking and disappearing before the cartel men could respond. "Vehicle teams, move in," the cartel commander ordered. "Use the mounted weapons." "I don't think so," Cyrus muttered, triggering his second set of charges. The access road erupted, disabling the approaching vehicles with precise explosions that left the occupants shaken but alive. Wade moved through the chaos like a shadow, his movements economical and deadly. 3 cartel operators went down before they realized he was there, their weapons disabled, their communications gear destroyed. "They're not using lethal force," someone realized. "They're toying with us." "Ghosts," another voice added, fear evident in his tone, like the stories from Afghanistan. Wade's voice cut through their communications. "Last chance to retreat. Next phase won't be as gentle." The cartel commander's response was predictable. He ordered his remaining men to converge on the farmhouse. It was exactly what Wade had planned. 4. "All teams, execute Phase 2, he commanded. The real trap was sprung. Hidden lights blazed to life, ruining the cartel operators' night vision. Sonic devices that Cyrus had planted created disorienting frequencies. And through it all, Wade's team moved with lethal precision, systematically disarming and disabling their opponents. "Fall back," the cartel commander finally ordered. "Full retreat. Fall back." But retreat wasn't as easy as they'd planned. Every escape route led to another trap, another invisible opponent that seemed to anticipate their every move. Within 15 minutes, it was over. 30 elite cartel operators lay disabled and disarmed across Wade's property. None dead, but all thoroughly defeated by opponents they'd never even managed to spot clearly. "Send the message," Wade ordered as Ghost reactivated his communications gear. "Let their bosses know exactly what happened here." "They won't take this humiliation lightly," Knox warned, maintaining his overwatch position. "Counting on it," Wade replied. That was just the greeting. Now we start dismantling their entire operation. Through their surveillance, they watched the few cartel members who had escaped speed away into the night. They would report to their superiors about facing an invisible enemy that had systematically taken apart their elite strike force. "Think they'll figure it out?" Doc asked as they regrouped. "About who they're really dealing with." "They'll try," Wade said, checking his equipment. "But by the time they realize they're up against Phantom Team, it'll be too late. Their entire operation in this valley is about to become a ghost story." Dawn revealed the aftermath of the night's battle. Disabled vehicles littered Wade's property, and the local sheriff's department was quietly processing the captured cartel operators. "They're talking," Ghost reported, monitoring interrogations through hacked channels. "And their bosses aren't happy. They're calling in someone named El Coyote." Wade's expression hardened. Victor Ramirez, ex-Mexican Special Forces commander turned cartel enforcer. "We crossed paths in Colombia back in '92. That mission's still classified," Knox added from his observation post. "But the locals still tell stories about the night Phantom Team took down an entire drug fortress without leaving a trace." Ghost's equipment picked up new chatter. "Multiple private jets landing at regional airports. They're bringing in professional contractors from across the country." "Good," Wade replied, checking his tactical displays. "Means they're taking us seriously. Time for Phase 2. His team gathered in the Barnes Command Center, where Wade revealed more of his preparations. The farm's strategic location wasn't an accident. He'd spent years preparing for potential threats. While they're focused on us, he explained, we start dismantling their infrastructure. Ghost, you have their communication protocols? Better than that, Ghost grinned. Got their entire operational network mapped. They're using ex-military channels thinking they're secure, but they never knew who designed those channels originally, Wade finished. Back when I consulted for the Pentagon, the team studied the cartel's Valley operations displayed on their tactical screens. 7 farms converted to distribution hubs, all connected by seemingly innocent delivery routes. El Coyote will recognize our tactics, Knox warned. He'll know it's you. Counting on it, Wade replied. He'll commit everything to taking us down. Meanwhile, we're already inside their network, Ghost finished, his fingers flying across his keyboard. Starting cascade failure of their communications. Now. Across the valley, cartel operations began experiencing mysterious equipment failures. Vehicles wouldn't start. Security systems went offline. Communication channels filled with ghost signals. They're paranoid now, Doc reported, monitoring intercepted messages. Starting to see phantoms everywhere. Just like old times, Cyrus added, checking detonators for their next series of surprises. Remember Tehran? When we convinced that entire Revolutionary Guard unit they were being haunted? Wade nodded grimly. Same principle. Psychological warfare multiplies force effectiveness. By tonight, every cartel operator in this valley will be jumping at shadows. A message crackled through their command center, broadcast on an old Delta Force emergency frequency that only a handful of operators would know. Phantom. El Coyote's voice was cold. I should have known. That farm's location. Too perfect to be coincidence. Victor, Wade replied calmly. Still sore about Colombia? You humiliated me. Destroyed my military career. Now I'm going to burn everything you've built here. You're welcome to try. But ask yourself, if I let you find this frequency, what else have I already done to your operation? The silence that followed was telling. They could almost hear El Coyote realizing the implications. How many systems were already compromised? How many operations already exposed? You've got 2 choices, Wade continued. Pull out of the valley completely, or lose everything, and... Victor, this time I won't be as gentle as Colombia. You're outnumbered 50-1, old man, just like Kandahar. Wade's voice carried decades of deadly experience. When I earned the name Phantom, want to see why? The frequency went dead, but they could see the impact rippling through intercepted cartel communications. The legend of Phantom Team was spreading, creating the kind of fear that no amount of firepower could match. They're mobilizing everything, Ghost reported. At least 100 operators converging on the valley. El Coyote's calling in every contract team he can reach. Wade smiled grimly. Perfect. Let them come. While they're focused on us, our real operation begins, Knox finished, understanding the strategy. Because Wade's farm wasn't just a defensive position, it was the bait in a trap, decades in the making. And the cartel was about to learn why some ghosts from the past should never be awakened. Night fell over the valley as El Coyote's forces moved into position. Through their surveillance systems, Wade's team watched over 100 heavily armed operators establish a perimeter around the farm. They're using Colombian cartel tactics, Knox reported from his hidden sniper nest. 3-layer containment, overlapping fields of fire, no escape routes. That's what they think, Wade replied calmly. He turned to Ghost. Status of their communications? Fully compromised. They think they're using secure channels, but we're hearing everything. El Coyote's got teams on every ridge, plus helicopter support inbound. Cyrus checked his detonators. One final time. Just like old times. Remember Mogadishu? When they thought they had us surrounded? Until they realized we wanted them to surround us, Doc finished with a grim smile. El Coyote's voice crackled through their intercepted communications. All teams in position. Remember, Phantom Team are ghosts. They'll try to disappear into The shadows. Don't let them. Poor bastards, Knox muttered. Still thinking like conventional military. Wade studied his tactical displays, watching the cartel forces tighten their noose. They're expecting us to try to break out. Instead, we break in, Ghost finished, understanding the strategy. The attack began with overwhelming force. Helicopter gunships lit up the farmhouse with spotlights while assault teams moved in from multiple directions. The sound of their approach was meant to be intimidating. Over 100 operators moving as one. Now, Wade commanded softly. The real battle began in total silence. The cartel's night vision equipment suddenly failed, their communications filled with phantom signals, and their carefully planned formations fell apart as the ground itself seemed to shift beneath them. "What's happening?" Voices shouted over their channels. "We're losing contact with sectors 3 and 4, because Wade's team wasn't trying to escape. They were infiltrating the cartel's own formations, using their superior training to turn the enemy's numbers against them. In the chaos and darkness, the hunters became the hunted." "El Coyote," Wade's voice cut through their compromised frequencies. "Still using those old Colombian tactics? You never did learn." 50 elite cartel operators on the eastern ridge suddenly found themselves unable to move, caught in sophisticated tangle wire they'd never seen deployed. Another 40 on the western approach were separated by precisely placed explosions that left them unharmed but completely disoriented. "Find them!" El Coyote roared. "They're only 5 men." "Are we?" Wade's voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Check your thermal imaging. Count the signatures." The cartel operators did, and panic began to spread, because somehow they were detecting dozens of heat signatures moving through their own lines. Impossible patterns that their military training couldn't explain. "Ghost technology," someone whispered, "like the stories from Afghanistan." "Phantoms," another added. "We're fighting phantoms." The helicopter gunships tried to restore order by lighting up the battlefield. Instead, they fell victim to Wade's next trap. Sophisticated electronic warfare equipment rendered their systems useless, forcing them to retreat before they crashed. "Your mistake, Victor," Wade transmitted, "was thinking this was a conventional battle. You forgot what Phantom Team really does." Through their night vision, they watched El Coyote's massive force dissolve into chaos. Highly trained operators found themselves being systematically disarmed and disabled by enemies they couldn't see. Every attempt to restore order only created more confusion. "This isn't possible!" El Coyote's voice had lost its confidence. "You can't take down 100 men with just 5. "We're not taking you down," Wade replied calmly. "We're exposing you. Check your secure servers. Check your offshore accounts. While you were focused on crushing one old farmer, no." Understanding and horror filled El Coyote's voice as reports began flooding in. Because the farm battle had just been a distraction. While the cartel's entire focus was on Wade's property, Ghost had infiltrated their systems at every level. Evidence of their operations was being broadcast to law enforcement agencies across 3 countries. Their money was vanishing from supposedly secure accounts, and their entire command structure was being revealed to rival cartels. "You haven't just lost your army," Wade informed them. "You've lost everything, just like Colombia." The night erupted in desperate gunfire as cartel operators began turning on each other, suddenly unsure who they could trust. But Wade's team was already gone, living up to their nickname, leaving chaos and destruction in their wake. Dawn would reveal the full extent of the devastation, not in bodies or blood, but in the complete dismantling of one of the most sophisticated criminal operations on the continent. And it had all been accomplished by 5 aging operators who'd proven that some legends never fade and some ghosts should never be awakened. 3 weeks into the aftermath, the Household Cavalry Training Center unveiled its new advanced mounted combat facility. The state-of-the-art center, inspired by Thunder and Connor's handling of Thompson's threat, represented a revolution in military mounted training. Each movement, Connor demonstrated to international observers, must serve both ceremonial tradition and combat effectiveness. He and Thunder showed how the same precise ceremonial steps could instantly transform into battlefield maneuvers. The massive stallion moved with fluid grace, his power now clearly visible beneath the ceremonial tack. Thompson, transformed from underground fighter to military advocate, had become a regular speaker at the facility. His journey from drunk aggressor to respectful student resonated powerfully with new recruits and public visitors alike. "Look at their precision," Thompson explained, analyzing his own takedown footage. "I threw everything I had at them, thinking I could intimidate a ceremonial horse. Instead, I triggered a combat response from a mount that had faced actual enemy fire." That's the difference between underground fighting and real military experience. The Metropolitan Police Mounted Branch had incorporated the incident into their core training. The Thunder Protocol of maintaining ceremonial bearing during threat response had become standard teaching at mounted police academies worldwide. What they demonstrated, explained Chief Inspector Wells, wasn't just self-defense. It was perfect professional control under extreme provocation. That's what we want all our mounted officers to achieve. Military veterinarians from around the world studied Thunder's response patterns. The stallion had demonstrated a level of combat discipline previously thought impossible in military mounts. His ability to switch instantly from ceremonial duty to tactical response had revolutionized military animal training. "This goes beyond basic control," explained Dr. Sarah Morrison, Chief Military Veterinary Officer. "Thunder showed us that mounted units can maintain perfect ceremonial bearing while being combat ready. He's rewritten our understanding of what's possible in military animal training." The underground fighting scene had undergone its own transformation. Fight clubs that once mocked military ceremony now enforced strict respect policies around service animals. Thompson's humbling had become a cautionary tale in gyms across Europe. Connor and Thunder's combat footage from Afghanistan had been declassified for training purposes. The videos showed the team navigating treacherous mountain passes, conducting covert operations that would have been impossible for conventional forces. Each mission demonstrated why their ceremonial perfection was built on a foundation of real combat experience. "These aren't just parade horses," Colonel Harrison explained to a documentary crew. "Every mount in the household cavalry is trained for potential combat deployment." Thunder's response to Thompson wasn't exceptional. It was the natural reaction of a highly trained military asset. Tourist behavior around mounted guards had changed dramatically. The crowd still gathered for ceremonies, but with a new understanding. They weren't watching a show anymore. They were witnessing elite military teams maintaining centuries of tradition while being ready for instant tactical response. Thompson's documentary series, Beyond Ceremony: Real War Horses, had become mandatory viewing at military academies worldwide. His latest episode, featuring Thunder's combat record, shattered viewer records, and transformed public understanding of mounted military units. The incident had redefined the relationship between ceremonial duty and combat readiness. As one veteran, cavalry officer, noted, "Thompson didn't just challenge a horse that day. He challenged centuries of military tradition backed by battlefield experience. The outcome was never in doubt." "Multiple vehicles approaching from the south," Ghost reported. "Not cartel. Different tactical pattern." Wade studied the surveillance feeds. 3 weeks had passed since El Coyote's fall, and word had spread about the valley's defenders. Now, they were facing a new threat. A paramilitary group that specialized in taking over rural communities. Serbian mercenaries, Knox identified through his scope. "Saw their work in Bosnia. They're worse than the cartel." "They're testing our perimeter," Wade observed. "Classic reconnaissance pattern. The mercenaries were professional, using sophisticated counter-surveillance measures, but they'd never faced anything like Phantom Team's integrated defense system." "Got their communications," Ghost announced. "They're working for someone big. Corporate interests wanting the valley for resource extraction." "Same story, different players," Wade replied. "Targeting those who seem defenseless." Their secure channel crackled with urgent messages from other communities. The Serbian group had already taken control of 2 counties in the next state. Their method was brutal, targeting key community leaders, making examples of those who resisted. They're stopping, Knox reported, setting up observation posts. More sophisticated than the cartel. These boys know their business. Wade smiled grimly. Show them ours. The response was immediate and devastating. Every mercenary observation post suddenly found itself exposed, their supposedly secure positions compromised by defenses they'd never detected. You're in protected territory, Wade's voice carried across their frequencies. Leave now. The mercenary commander's laugh was cold. Protected by what? We've studied the cartel's defeat. 5 old men got lucky. We're not so easily spooked by ghost stories. Check your tactical feeds again, Wade suggested calmly. The mercenaries' sophisticated equipment suddenly came alive with dozens of phantom signatures moving through their positions. Every escape route showed multiple hostile forces that didn't exist. Impossible, the commander breathed. Our systems are top-tier military grade. We're top-tier, Ghost corrected, his cyber warfare suite dismantling their technical advantage. About 20 years ago, when someone on our team designed them, the mercenaries found themselves caught in a web of electronic deception, unable to trust their own equipment. But Wade wasn't finished. Now check your accounts, he suggested. The commander's curse was eloquent as he discovered their operational funds vanishing, transferred through untraceable channels to the communities they'd victimized. Who are you people? Just farmers protecting our land, Wade replied. But if you need a reminder of why some territories are marked as forbidden, check your secure server. The files about Operation Phantom Strike in Kosovo just unlocked. The effect. The Serbian mercenaries' retreat was just the beginning. Word spread through the criminal underworld about the valley that couldn't be taken, protected by ghosts that struck without warning and vanished without trace. 3 more organizations have backed off from targeting rural communities, Ghost reported, monitoring global communications. The legend of Phantom Team is growing. Wade stood on his porch, watching the sunset over land he'd defended with more than just weapons. His farm had become a symbol, proof that the defenseless could fight back when veterans stood together. Got visitors, Knox called from his position. Different type this time. A convoy approached, not hostiles, but representatives from other communities. Former military, police, citizens tired of watching their homes fall to criminal organizations. They want to learn, Sarah explained, having vetted them, to set up their own defense networks. Wade studied the group. He saw the same determination he'd recognized in his Delta Force days. Ordinary people pushed too far, ready to fight back. Show them, he ordered his team. Over the next hours, they revealed the truth behind the valley's defenses. Not just sophisticated technology and tactical expertise, but a network of veterans and civilians working together, protecting what was theirs. This was never about one farm, Wade explained to the visitors. It's about showing others they can fight back, that they're not alone. Ghost's monitoring systems lit up with new alerts. Criminal organizations worldwide reacting to the spread of community defense networks based on Wade's model. They're realizing their targets aren't helpless anymore, Doc observed. Good, Wade replied. Let them learn what happens when they push too far, when they wake sleeping giants. The sun set on a changed valley. Wade's farm stood peaceful but vigilant, a testament to the truth he'd learned in decades of combat. Sometimes the strongest warriors are those who fight not for glory, but to protect others. His team had found a new mission in retirement. Not just defending one piece of land, but teaching others to stand against those who would prey on the seemingly defenseless. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, phantom warriors stood ready, ensuring that some places remained forever free from those who would rule through fear, the end.